Welcome back to the Changemaker podcast. I'm your host, Deke Copenhaver. Today, my guest is my good friend, Tommy Wafford. Tommy has over 14 years, has done 6 startups, 3 acquisitions, Forbes magazine and PC Mag articles, 2017 Best Places to Work award, dozens of employees that became family, and even some family that became employees. I love that. He's finally doing what he's always dreamed of, training, encouraging, and teaching entrepreneurs and organizational leaders all over the U.S. and internationally. Tommy currently serves as the managing partner at an agency that specializes in creator and influencer management, the head of content and growth at a social media startup, and the CEO of the Leadfast Company and soon to be published author. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome my friend, Tommy Wafford.
Welcome to the Changemaker podcast, hosted by Deke Copenhaver. Deke is the author of The Changemaker, a Forbes publishing book that has reached #1 on Amazon on multiple occasions and in multiple categories like management skills and total quality management. During this podcast, Deke interviews exceptional change-making leaders. Deke currently operates Copenhaver Consulting, where he helps local governments and other public organizations maximize their potential. He's also a sought-after public speaker. We hope that the Changemaker has an impact on you today and that you find takeaways that make you a better leader in your life. Now, here's Deke.
Hey, Deke. Thanks for letting me come on, man.
Yeah.
That sounds great, by the way. It's almost as if I wrote it.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, well, but it is great. And, obviously you've got a lot on your plate, but just tell us a little bit about, your history, your background, where you grew up and everything. And I just think it's fascinating that it has been wonderful for me to watch, the entrepreneur and the man you've become, but just tell us a little bit about your upbringing.
Yeah, so should not be any of those things on that piece of paper. I grew up in the middle of a farm in a HUD home in Ward, South Carolina. I think there were 117 people in my entire town.
Wow.
I grew up with my best friend's dad owned a peach farm, and so I did peaches. Like, I just hung out in the farm, and we rode around and did redneck stuff. Had jacked up trucks and fished, and it was a good life, man. It was a really good life. And then went to high school in Gilbert, South Carolina, which is the countryest sounding city in the planet, Gilbert, South Carolina, and ended up going to school for theater and Bible. Was a youth pastor for 13 years, and ended up going into what we would call the marketplace with a friend of mine. Started a business that failed terribly, failed is a strong word. It didn't make money. So as a business, it failed. As an education, it was priceless.
Yep.
So 19 months with no paycheck, food stamps, all those things. Just one dream, kept believing in it, kept starting over. And then eventually same, all those things that you read, I've done with the same guy. So my best friend, Andrew, and I are business partners. And, so grew a software company that we shelved. We actually invented what is essentially Groupon 8 months before Andrew Mason in Chicago. Here live in Augusta, we had it running. And so we had this really cool concept. And then the big guys came in, washed us out. So we ended up having to start over. We built websites because we knew how to code. So we'd build websites for, you're here in South Company's studio, the Augusta podcast studio. Mike Thomas, who runs this company, was starting this company when we were starting out, and we would go to Mike's sales pitches and pitch websites. So we would make enough money to live on while we were trying to figure out another idea. And then my mom, who was a food service director in Aiken County, South Carolina, she ran all the public school lunch rooms for that county, said, I have a communication problem with my parents. And I was like, there ought to be a technical way to solve that. And we built this little app called Meal Viewer, and we let parents and students know what was for lunch in the school cafeterias and what ingredients were in the food and what allergies. And it was really cool. We helped diabetic students count carbs, and we did some really neat things. And that grew. And so we grew that to, we were in 42 states. We had 6.5 million people had access to the app every day. And then that got acquired by a great company called Heartland School Solutions, and we were sort of off to the races.
Yeah. Well, I remember, when I first read an article about Meal Viewer, it was amazing to me. I'm like, we've got this phenomenal, technology startup on Broad Street in downtown Augusta, and I bet most people really have no clue that it's there. And so that seemed to be the case, but I loved promoting you guys and what you were doing, just what you guys did for downtown Augusta. I mean, it was amazing to sort of change the culture. There still needs to be a little bit more culture change, but you were proudly a part of being a catalyst to help move downtown Augusta forward.
Yeah, we wanted to be very visible, so we found, and we were growing. We were in North Augusta because we started in Andrew's bedroom, like his back bedroom, and we were just there, and it was me and him, and then we hired, who was first? Daniel, my best friend, another friend of mine, Daniel Buford. We hired him to do sales, and then we had to hire some more programmers, and then we were in this little office in North Augusta, and we had 2 offices. I think we're like 17 people in 2 offices. So we were like, the programmers all had an office, and they were just stacked around the room, and then I was in an office with the salespeople, and then we had people sitting in the hallway. I mean, we were just as crammed in, and so when we found space, it really was about affordability. Reputation didn't matter. We just needed space, right? But what was most exciting to me about coming into downtown Augusta was that we got to determine, it was a blank slate. We could determine the culture. People had pretty much walked away from establishing new business downtown because 14 years ago, it was sort of a ghost town down here. It was in the height of a lot of the people who own, I won't say all the people, a lot of the people that owned the buildings they were just in disrepair. Yeah. We happened to find a really great building with a really great landlord, and we moved in, 17 people into 3,700 square feet, which still seems small, but it was inadequate. And grew that to 27 employees. In 2017, we were the 3rd best place to work in the state of Georgia. We were the only Augusta company on the list, and it was great when we got recognized by magazines and everything that was going on around downtown. And we were the first tech company. And now obviously the Cyber Center's here, and you just told me they just announced a $2 million grant for some tech incubator downtown, and we were really the first people downtown doing something.
Well, and I want to get into leadership and culture, but I think, and I've had a lot of entrepreneurs on the show, but it's sort of, for me, I view everything I do as an entrepreneurial endeavor, whether it was, being mayor of the city, everything I do, this podcast. But really, I think one thing I love about entrepreneurs is they all talk about failure. Yeah. And I think what some people, particularly younger entrepreneurs, fear of failure can be a major motivator to stop you from stepping out and taking a leap of faith. So talk a little bit about, because I'm sure there were times when you're like, man, I'm on freaking food stamps. Yeah. What am I doing? But talk about overcoming that fear.
Well, I just don't have that. Yeah. Maybe it's like the theater background. Maybe I don't know what it is. I've never been embarrassed about anything ever in my life, and so I'll fail in public. I'm one of those. So I play piano. And so in my mind, there are 2 types of piano players. There are the kinds of people who practice really hard, but then they play really quiet because they don't want anyone to hear it if they mess up. And I practice and prepare, but when I play loud because I expect to do well, and I want you to hear it when it happens. Yeah. I want to play. I just believe I'm going to play well. And so we have this thing that everything is figure outable. And so I just look at like issues and problems as opportunities, and I'm just not scared of failure, but I think that is one of the main factors. I would say it can contribute probably 3 or 4 things that really made us succeed. That being one of the major ones is that I'm not scared of failing. Yeah, I'll fail. And I'm going to talk real big about what our plans are. And if that never comes to fruition and people think like I talk more than I execute, that's okay, because I always execute more than they talk. So I just don't care. I can have 50 plates spinning and drop 12. And, the 38 that land are going to be fine or better than the 6 that you spun really cautiously, So that's sort of been my motto.
Well, it's kind of, I love sports analogies, but I'm like, I've failed at a lot of endeavors in my life too, but it's like you have got to keep putting up the shots because the only shot that you're not going to make is the shot that you don't take.
That's right. Is that Wayne Gretzky?
I think that was Wayne Gretzky. I didn't even know I was quoting Wayne Gretzky. But I'll tell you, it's funny, though, that you mentioned being a performer. So Jay Samet, who I had on the show recently, but he put himself through college through UCLA as a magician. And he
I didn't know that about Jay. That's
yeah, but I love this and I love what I do because I'm so curious and I learn from my guests. He said, you know what? That is the only job where everybody wants to see you fail. I mean, if you're an actor or a singer, people come because they want to see you succeed. He said, but everybody with magicians, they just want to know what the trick is and want to see you fail. He was like, putting myself through college doing that, walking into a boardroom was no problem whatsoever.
Yeah. No, I think like there are two waiting tables for me is performative.
Yep.
You have to, whether or not you're having, you got to put a smile. If you want to tip, you got to be good at this, and you got to put a smile on your face, and you got to. So like I was always really great at waiting tables because I just put on the role of being a great waiter, right? So being on stage, waiting tables is the closest most people will get to being on stage.
Yeah.
So I think everybody should go wait tables. Because that skill set of dealing with people, the soft skills that you develop dealing with people as a job,
yeah,
that is the biggest contributing factor to whether or not you win in life.
Yep.
Like, soft skills are always better than technical skills. Always. I can train technical skills. You have to live soft skills. You have to fail to develop soft skills.
Well, and that gets into a little bit of culture building.
Yeah.
So we talked about the culture at MealViewer, and you said you had people working 16-hour days and loving it. But I think part of that is, as leaders, we need to model it for people. So if we're talking about soft skills, you're asking a lot out of people, but you need to respect them and have those soft skills to model that for what they look like for your customers.
Yeah, no, for sure. But when we were at MealViewer on our wall, I'll send you the picture. But on our wall, we had 4 mottos, four things that were like our company ethos. And the first one was that customers will never love a company until the employees love it first. And we just believed that. And then we decided with our customers what we wanted to be known for. We wanted to be known as the company that it was fun to do business with.
Yep.
And so our industry ran off trade shows, and we would go to trade shows, we would throw the best parties. They weren't the biggest parties, but they were the best parties because we all came and we all had fun, and we had fun with our customers, not at the expense of them. And like, it really became a family atmosphere. And so like literally I would tell all of our employees every week, like if your car breaks down at 4 a.m. and you're 2 states away, I want to be the first call. Like, don't wake up your wife. Don't wake up your dad. Like, call me. I'll get in the car. I'll come. Like, and we treated everybody like family, in a real sense, because we considered them family. We were never trying to build a culture. We were just treating people like family.
Well, and that's the thing to me, though. It's interesting to watch with labor shortages and just the world has been turned upside down by a pandemic. And there are still people in leadership positions that are clinging to the status quo. And I'm like, there's no status quo anymore. But it just seems to me like people would get that you have to develop good cultures and become employers of choice, or otherwise you're going to miss out on the best workers. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think any worker can be the best worker if there's a good leader.
Yep.
Like, so everything in me, and you and I have had this conversation a million times, everything in life for me comes down to one word, and that's leadership.
Yep.
100% of the time, whether or not the outcome is good or bad, doesn't matter. Napoleon said that a leader's job is to define reality and offer hope.
Yep.
Like, so whether the outcome doesn't matter, because I can redefine the reality as a leader. I can say, okay, I know this wasn't our intended outcome. I know this looks like a failure, but what we did was learn very important lessons. This is going to keep us from failing. I can redefine the reality, and then I can offer hope. That's a leader's job. That's what they do. So for me, looking at like employer shortages and all this other stuff, I can get 300% out of a third of the workforce if they are full of hope, understand that they're working with a purpose, and they feel a greater sense than a paycheck for what they're doing. So I can, with a third of my employees, get the same output as if I was fully staffed, if I am redefining reality, offering hope, and then giving them purpose. And so as a leader, I always look at those, like I said, any shortcoming is an opportunity. And so I look at that and go, well, if I didn't have enough employees, I would still get everything I needed out of the ones I do have. But I've never had to be worried about a shortness of employees because the people that do work for me are always wanting to bring people in because I'm a good boss.
Yeah.
I'm a good boss because I don't think that I'm a boss. My job isn't to be the boss. My job is to be the leader. And if you work for a leader, it's addictive. Like a good leader.
Oh yeah. It's interesting. So my wife, Lisa, and I, who you know well, she runs a property management business, manages a lifestyle center. But I've talked to her, and she's done it without knowing it. So they just had a gentleman that worked for her dad before her and for her now, but he just retired after 39 years. And like they've got some employees that have been there 20 plus years. They have virtually no turnover. And I'm like, Melissa, whether you know it or not, I mean, you are that type of leader. You've created this culture where people want to work for you. And she always, and I love this, and I always do this too, and I'm sure you do, when somebody will call her boss, she's like, I'm not a boss, I am a team leader, because we are a team. But I think that's a great example of, good leaders don't put themselves above the teams they serve.
Yeah, and so it was always a rule for us. I've got six people that work with me now, and technically on paper they work for me, but I wouldn't even say it here.
No,
everybody works with me, and I correct them. So like when we're out and we're doing an activity or something, they introduce themselves and they're like, "Hey, I work for Tommy." I'm like, "No, you don't. Like you don't work for me." Like my friend Megan worked with me. Like she was part of our business and she was my PA, and so like she technically, in a very real sense, worked for me. She was in charge of running my life. I never let her say that. Like she worked with me all the time, and that's an important distinction for every leader, is that your people don't work for you, they work with you.
I want to reference something. When we'd actually met, I believe, while I was in office.
I'm always scared when you get back into stories without us. I want to see where it's going to go. So that's great. Okay.
But I remember when I first found out about MealViewer, and I reached out to you, and we went to have lunch. And you said to me, Deke, I will do anything you ask me to do as long as you don't put me on a committee that gets nothing done. And I want to talk about committees versus teams.
Yeah.
Because I often say that committees are cul-de-sacs where good ideas go to die. and it just seems like so often, coming from a local government background, it's like, let's establish a committee to look at this, or let's do a task force. And I wonder what percentage of those committees and task force ever actually solve a problem, whereas teams execute.
So here's why I think that is. This is my take on that, and this is fun. I didn't know we were going to talk about this today.
Me neither.
All right, so committees are formed because there's this thought that, hey, we have an idea, and we want to vet the idea in committee to make sure, and we create representation in the committee to protect whatever they're representing, so their constituency, whatever it is. We create to protect them from losing out because of the idea. Well, then you start debating the merit of the idea from a defensive posture, right?
Yep.
Rather than deciding before the idea goes to the only difference between a committee and the team is the posture that it takes surrounding the idea.
Yep.
So a committee is a defensive posture, deciding whether or not the idea is going to hurt their constituents. Or you say, hey, we have an idea that's going to benefit everyone or unequally benefit everyone. So maybe this particular time, this idea is going to, over-index the benefit towards downtown Augusta. We'll use Augusta because, everybody here understands our government is a little messed up here. And I'll say it. So we can't do anything to downtown that's not going to equally benefit the south side of Augusta or out towards Hepzibah or over on the other side of out towards the interstate. So like we fight over territories and things die in committee because people are protecting their particular territory. Yep. Or saying, hey, we believe that as a whole, this idea is great. Now we're going to assign it to these people to go execute and carry the idea.
Yep.
There's no posture of defensive-ness because we've already decided this is a great idea. So, for example, here in Augusta, we went round and around about building a new, auditorium here, and what are we going to do with the James Brown? Is it going to come down? Is it going to be downtown? Is we going to put it out there? We went round and round and round and round with that decision. instead of just saying, hey, we believe that a new entertainment space is good for our community as a whole.
Yeah.
Now your job as 8 people is to figure out how to execute this to benefit everybody the most versus how do we execute this and not take away from anybody the least.
Yep.
And just those 2 postures make all the difference.
It really does. And that's, to me, teams are built on skill sets. And it's interesting, and I've spoken for nonprofits about this, about developing your board. And I'm sure that many other places are not unlike here in Augusta, where you sort of see the same names retreaded on boards again and again. And I've shared in speaking to nonprofits, I'm like, just because a board member can make every board meeting doesn't necessarily make them a great board member.
Yeah, no, and also, like, if you've got to create a farm team somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? And so the things that you can't teach are common sense, wisdom, compassion, empathy. When you find someone who has those 4 things, that are interested in public service, that have a bent towards the common good, those types of people, when they're around, and we know them.
Yeah.
We're friends with most of them.
Yeah.
I hope we're friends. If you're that person and you're not my friend, please call me.
Exactly.
But you can train all the skills. So I think local governments should have a farm team of potential committee members and board members where it's like, hey, listen, we think you're a valuable member of the community. We appreciate your insight and your wisdom. You speak well. And by speaking well, I don't mean the vernacular. I mean that you include other people and you have an inclusive voice. And you seem to have some wisdom and some insight. And we want to include that insight. But you're not qualified to talk about zoning.
Yeah.
So we're going to send you to a zoning seminar. We're going to find some people of all age brackets and representations, and we're going to send them to some education that qualifies them for the role, because they have all the intangibles. Back to those soft skills.
Yep.
They have all the things necessary to make wise decisions. So let's give them the technical chops that help them do that, and then let them go serve for a couple of years. And then while you're doing that, farm more people.
Yeah. Well, it's basically, applying what you would do in the private sector to the public sector.
You would immediately do that in a business. You would identify a potential leader in your business, and you would say, hey, we're going to send you some executive training. We're going to prep you for your future. Public sector doesn't do that.
Makes sense to me. Well, so Tommy, you and I caught back up recently, but we've talked a lot about what you've done, but let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now, because it's extremely interesting, and you're in and out of Augusta, you're in Nashville, you're all over the place.
Yeah. So I've got a lot of things going on. So I am currently the head of content and growth for an app called Riff, which is RIFF. It's live video and audio. You can have huge audiences. So it's a community app, really, is what it is, and it allows people to basically host their own shows, go on, bring guests on, talk to people. You can have an audience, and it's a really cool application. There is a streaming music background in the whole thing, so you can create a vibe. It's a really neat thing. We're doing a lot of cool stuff that's about to launch, and it's Silicon Valley based, San Francisco startup. The 2 founders are Stanford engineers. They're older, so they're not 20. By older, I mean they're not 20.
Yeah.
And you think most tech startups are in their 20s, they're in their 40s, like me. Female CEO, so she's really she's bad action, she's cool. Kara's awesome. But it's great to be in this great, really fast paced moving company. But the best part about it is that my entire team are under 30.
Yeah. And
I get to spend my day hanging out with people who this is their first big boy job, big girl job.
Yeah.
Not to be pejorative and make them feel smaller. That's not. None of them believe that about me. But this is their first real job in the private sector, and they're building something amazing every day.
Yeah.
So doing that's basically my 9 to 5. It's more like my 1 to 10.
Yeah.
Because they're West Coast. But so we work really hard together as a team. That's blowing up. So that's been really fun to see another tech startup that I'm a part of really launch and take off, and hopefully I have something to do with it. I'm also a buddy of mine who owns a management company in Nashville that manages some of the country music's biggest stars, really, honestly. We haven't made the public announcement about the initiative yet, so I can't talk about it. But that's coming, a couple of weeks. But we're starting a part of the management company to manage creators and influencers. There's a huge economic shift coming.
Yeah.
Everybody sees it. Like the creator marketplace, all of advertising is changing. Like the influencer marketing is becoming a big thing. Amazon has sunk like hundreds of millions of dollars into having creators just shop online with their audience, and then they see that it's exponential growth in product sales. And so, but creators don't have anybody that's looking at that marketplace and is an expert in it really, and is helping them not just organize brand deals, but also organize themselves as a brand, taking yourself from being an influencer to being a brand and what that means for you. And so instead of trying to day trade attention, build a brand, build something out of what you are. Who are you as a person? And so we do a lot of business development with those guys. We've signed, I think we have 25 million collective eyeballs under management right now, which is great. And we've only been around a couple of months. And so, and then I have a book that I just finished. And so I'm hoping even today to meet with the illustrator that's doing layout and figure out what the book's going to be.
Well, all of that is awesome, man. I'm so proud of you. But as we start to wind down, I wanted you to speak directly to young entrepreneurs out there. So here again, I think part of good leadership is to provide people hope. There are kids growing up on farms in South Carolina and every place else today that think, I want to get into the technology business, but that's just not for me. I'm come from 4 generations of peach farmers or, whatever. But speak to them, because I know they've got to be out there someplace about taking that leap of faith.
Yeah, listen, my kids' generation. So I've got a 13, a 9, and a 5-year-old. The generation ahead of them, if you're in high school going into college, if you're in college and you're just about to figure it out, you are the most advantaged generation in the history of the world. You can be anywhere in the world for under $1,000. You can work remotely on any project. You can learn skills. You don't even college isn't even necessary anymore. To make $150K a year, you can go take 6 certifications for free online through Google and go work for Google and make $150K a year. And all you need is a laptop. There is nothing stopping anyone who has a little bit of grit from becoming anything they want to be. The only thing necessary, and this is my line in the sand, there are 2 things that are necessary. The first one is good leadership. Yep. There are lots of things in life that can be taught. The best things can't have to be caught. I would imagine that's why Melissa, your wife, is such a great leader, because her dad was probably a great leader. And she caught this. Even if he never set her down and said, these are the 5 tenets to being a great leader, she caught it because she was in that environment. You have to position yourself environments and at the table, do whatever you can to put yourself at the table with great leaders. Yep. I've been very, very fortunate. That's 1. 2 is you have to cultivate an inability. And I know that sounds weird, to cultivate an inability. I don't have the ability to quit.
Yeah.
Something in that first 19 months with me and Andrew, and a lot of it I'll put on him. And Andrew, my business partner, is a grinder. He just won't stop. He played basketball in college. He knows how to work out. And he wasn't super naturally talented from a basketball. He's really talented. He's a great basketball player, but it wasn't like he just woke up and could dribble and had handles. He's 6'6", and he's a good shooter. He had to work for everything he got, and he knows how to grind. And I didn't have that in me. But at 11 p.m., when we had been working 18 hours, and Drew was like, I'm going to go home around 3. And I was dying, and he was like, no, I've got 4 more hours. I'm going to go, and I would just stay. And he taught me how to grind. Somewhere in that first 19 months, I cultivated an inability to give up. And if you just don't give up, you always win. Time is the great equalizer. It may not happen at the same speed that other people get it, but if you will just not give up, eventually you'll learn enough lessons that you'll have the education necessary to get to the place that you want to be. It's just about not giving up. And people say, if it doesn't happen in 12 months, I'm going to go back to my job. If it doesn't happen in 2 years, I'll go back to my job. Like, man, I YOLO everything every day.
Yeah.
Like, literally every day. I told people, somebody the other day, you could take everything away from me tonight, and in 12 months, I'd be a millionaire. Not because I have a giant skill set that other people don't have. I really don't. I know 3 things. But I know I won't give up. And now I'm starting from experience.
Yep.
And so if you just keep collecting experiences, even if you have to start over 100 times, every time you start over better.
Yep.
And if you'll keep going, if you'll cultivate the inability to get up and do whatever it takes to sit at the table of good leaders. By the way, that the answer to that is always serve. If you'll go serve your community, serve your church, serve your family, go serve organizations, and put yourself at the table with great leaders, you will always be better and you will always win. And that's all that, like, if you're 23 and you're like, I don't know where I'm going to start my career. I don't want to go be a business investment banker like my dad wants me to do, or I don't want to be a doctor. Or I don't want to be an engineer. I don't want to be a teacher. I want to be a social media influencer. You know how hard that is to be on all the time? I talk to them all day long. It's impossible. I couldn't do it. It's the one thing I just don't want to do it. Whatever it is that you want to do, if you'll put yourself at the table with great leaders, no matter the subject, just go be around great leaders and then build an inability to give up, you'll win.
Yeah. Well, great wisdom and insight. So listen to that out there. But as we wind down, I just want to ask you a question I ask all my guests. Yeah. So what on a regular basis puts a smile on your face and brings joy to your heart?
Singing like an idiot with my kids in the car. Did it this morning. My family, my children are all pretty musical, which is fun. My 9-year-old just started playing trumpet, so that's fun for us at the house.
I'm sure.
But my 13-year-old, is super musical, plays all the instruments, and so he and I have conversations on one level in the car, and we're like, oh, listen to this organ part, and like we're all listening to blues and gospel and all this other stuff, and because he plays keys and like me, and so we're talking about these parts, and then Elliot's like, Elliot's dancing in the back seat, and Sutton's singing, and she's 5. She doesn't know any of these words. And so she's just singing real loud, and then dropping the boys off at school and taking Sutton this morning. We put on Disney songs, and we were singing at the top of our lungs. Like, singing with my kids and just being goofy with my kids is the best. It is 100% the best. And it's, that's that whole laughter is medicine for the soul. And my kids make me laugh more than anybody else. And so I love, my kids are the best.
Well, great answer. Well, Tommy, I will tell you, thank you for being an awesome guest. You've provided great wisdom, and that's part of the goal of the show, is that every episode people can get up and go, I learned something from that. And maybe it put a smile on my face, and sometimes it brings you a tear. But as long as you're moving the ball down the court and doing something good for the community and for society as a whole, and that's what you do.
I appreciate you, Deke, and you as well. This has been great, and much success. I hope this becomes the #1 podcast in the nation. This would be great.
That's what we're shooting for.
All right. I love it.
All right, brother.
Thanks.
Appreciate you. All righty. That's all the time we've got for today. Dropping the mic, and we are out. Hey, guys. Thanks for listening to or watching the Changemaker podcast today. Greatly appreciate it. If you're listening and you want to see the video, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Deke Copenhaver. That's pretty easy to remember, I would think. But really, we also want to remind you to like, subscribe, rate across all platforms, download. And if you're looking for a coach, a speaker, or anything, you know where to find me. Just email me at me@dekecopenhaver.com. And thanks so much for listening.